Hi everyone, welcome back into the classroom. We're going to continue some of our painting for spring by painting one of the most favorite, matter of fact, it's the state bird here. I was born in Oregon, and I remember it's the state bird of Oregon as well, the meadowlark. And we have the western meadowlark out here. Beautiful bird. In the springtime, they come back, and they're so, they just sing such a beautiful, beautiful song. And a couple of years ago, I was sitting out at the deck out at the farm and recorded this one just singing away on the, it was nice. The video quality isn't all that great, but this was like 10 years ago. So they are absolutely everywhere here, all over Nebraska, and they're all back now. I see them every morning now on the walk. So anyway, they're a beautiful bird. They're a little bit larger of a bird, and you can actually get quite close to them. So I really got to get some better sound quality out of them. But anyway, so I went and found this photo. I have lots of photos of them, but I do like supporting the photographers of Adobe stock photos because they just give me so much inspiration and stuff. So I go over there and support them wherever I can. So I got this photo from them, which was just really, really nice. And you can get it over there as well. I then went ahead and put it on here. Now, I've showed some of you that are beginners that are following on and want to learn some of these different techniques. I'm going to show you all different kinds of ways over the next, several weeks to do paintings. But one of the things that I always tell everybody is you don't have to draw immediately. Drawing is something, and I've shown you how to draw, in other courses and other videos. But drawing is something that can come. I break paintings, like I've said, into three parts: the color theory of it, the technique of it, and the drawing of it. And drawing is something that's really important. But you can also transfer. So like what I did on this particular one, I have some goldenrod here too, which is actually the state flower here for Nebraska as well. It's all over the prairie. I'm going to add some of that to him. But what you can do is you can place the photo that's like, anywhere that you want to have it. And then you put in this. This is not carbon paper. This is transfer paper. It's artist transfer paper. You can get it like Dick Blick, or you can go online, look for it, and it's transfer paper. And you put the shiny side up, the dark side down, and wherever you make a mark, like you just take something like here, and wherever you make a mark like that, that transfers really easy. And it does erase, but most of the time you can sit here and erases, so it does come off without a problem. But and it doesn't smear like a carbon paper or something like that. And so that's a great way. I've showed some of you in other videos, if you want to make something really detailed, then what you do is you take and you make a plastic transfer of it. So you use this clear plastic, Mylar. You can buy this on Dick Blick, or you can buy it on Amazon and stuff. And you use a permanent pin. This is a permanent pin, a Japanese pin that I found that's instantaneously permanent. So when you make the mark, it won't smear immediately. And then you can come in here with this and you can follow right along very carefully the idea of what it is where you want to paint him. And then you'll have something that you can look and position him. And those of you that have studied portraits and stuff with me, this is something that I recommend if you're doing portraits right away while you're learning how to draw. We all need to learn how to draw. And I'm not saying this is a shortcut to get away from drawing. Drawing is something that you have to learn. But this is a way for you to get some great paintings under your belt while you're doing that. So you make sure that you preserve your drawing. And so the one thing that's really safe about using the plastic is that you can, after I get all this paint on, I can still lay it over the top and see, it came off a little bit here. Something's bothering me. And the reason why that's really good is that if you're painting, you have those three elements that you have to eliminate if something's bothering you. So being able to take that clear Mylar, put it on there, and then see, okay, I'm off right there, and see if that's the trouble. And if that isn't the trouble, then it's either your color or your technique. So it's a process of elimination, okay? All right, so I have it again on my board here. This is 11 inches this way, 14 inches this way. I'm gonna put him on this old piece of wood like he is here. These are all over, old fence posts are all over the Nebraska prairie. And then I'll put some goldenrod and stuff up here. And so I have him, pretty much a nice, I will put this, a lot of people here call it traceables. We call them pattern. I'll put a traceable for those of you that are on the membership. I'll put this in the membership as well, so you have that. I gave the board one coat of the canvas prep medium, sanded it with 180 grit sandpaper. There will be an entire video on prepping surfaces and stuff for all these paintings we're going to do. Okay, so you can look for that. All right, so let's go in, and the first thing I want to do is tone down, get rid of some of the white. He has a greenish background. I'm not a real big, huge fan of that background on here, so I want to make more of a gray, I think, so then that'll make his brighter colors stand out, and then I can paint that brighter goldenrod too, and that'll stand out. So I want to make a gray, a bluish gray, and my blue here, I like to lean it slightly to the violet, so a little blue, a little violet. Let's take some burnt umber, because I want to add some of that burnt umber. When I gray, I don't normally go to the blacks. Black is too dead of a color. Now, I probably, just because we haven't used black that much so far, so I'll probably use a little black to show you how you can generate these yellow greens down in the lower part of him here, and we can warm it up with some burnt umber to make some of these other darker notes on him as well. So we'll probably add some of that, but let's just get this beautiful, this will make, and I'll vary this. So I got this is a nice, lovely gray. It might be, let's just take some of this out of the brush here. Maybe rinse that out a bit here. And this might be a little too cold. I'm going to put out some white, because I always put that white out and then I'll use all of that up and I'll use it in my background. So I'll put out some more white. So again, using the Heritage, this is all I use. Every video on this channel is Heritage Multimedia Acrylics. That's a paint that I designed in 2008. And the company now is owned and run by my daughter, and so you need to support her. Okay, all right. So here's the gray, and so it's kind of a cooler gray. If I want to warm it up, I can warm it with just a touch of yellow, and watch what this does. It's beautiful. That yellow oxide is such a beautiful color, and see, that's a nice, beautiful, slightly warmer gray. Let's use that. I'll add some water with it with my dirty brush here. And let's use that, paint this down. Now I'll just go right over the bird, because if you paint around him, it'll look just like you painted around him. And we don't want that. So we'll push that around. This gray would make an excellent backdrop there for that board, that old fence post that is there. Now what I can do is I can just tap back and wipe back off, and see, it won't smear that transfer paper. So you can wipe back, tap back off, and find some of the bird, and then we'll come in there and detail around him with smaller brushes and stuff. I'll take some of this gray and move it right up here out of the way and preserve that for later. But I do like to have sometimes on the birds and stuff right around into their line a bit. You'll see me on the other lessons, I'll say take it into the bird and put it on so that you can push some of it in, because it helps you make receding edges and stuff like that. So, and I like to do that with it. Now, I don't really, I'm not a real big fan of putting just blank backgrounds. Now, he would look fantastic. He does. He looks really, really good sitting against that, and he'll look great sitting against that color there. But I like the impressionism of painting, and so I like to add. And since he is yellow, I could, if I wanted to create the almost contrast, if I want to put a blue sky, not completely behind him, but I like to do strikes of color. I've told all of you that, and all that have been painting with me for the years that I've been running this channel, I like strikes of color on stuff. I know I'm gonna use that up, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more. But, and so if I want contrast, let's think about our color wheel here for a second and a little color theory. If I put out the phthalo is a blue-green, which means what is in that blue? The yellow, the bird's yellow, right? So blue-greens lean to blue and yellow, right? And yellow is in the bird, and so you'll get harmony. So a blue-green would give you harmony, a softer painting. So if I put the sky in there as a blue-green, if I put the sky in there as a blue-violet, blue leaning violet, there's no yellow in it, and violet, purple, is the complement of yellow. So what I'm doing is taking into a color that is heading more contrast. So if I want more contrast, contrast to the bird itself, I'll add a little bit of the violet to my blue and take it to a blue-violet. That might be just a touch too much. I want a nice blue-violet here, and I'll push that in. I'm just going to push this in as a little bit of as a note back behind him here. And so you can see that, and I'll probably, add some more and stuff to it, but not quite yet. I won't do it quite yet. Now, some of this is fairly dry. If you have a problem getting it off your pattern, I'm not, but if you do, just take a damp paper towel, and you see the damp paper towel will cut right through, and you can just slowly tap and kind of find your way around your little bird here again, bringing out any of the elements that you want to bring out. You can bring that. You can do that. So I like the strikes, and I like impressionistic. I like the alla prima that is, very impressionistic and marks and stuff. So nothing is absolutely perfect. You get a lot of brushwork and stuff like that. So we'll even let some of this blue-green come out here into the back, so it's a little bit different. And I like that, and I used to, for years, I was a smooth, perfect painter. Now I don't like to do that. All right, let's go in and let's start just blocking him in. I'm going to take a paper towel here, and I'm going to look for the undertone. So you have a cool undertone here, which leans yellow to yellow-green, and you have a warmer undertone here, which is really pretty close to like like a yellow oxide. It's a warmer color. Let's put yellow oxide on it, but here, and I'll see that. But you can see it's a little bit greener, right? It's a little bit greener. And so if I'm looking to tone it, see, burnt umber on our palette is a nice warm tone, but the word burnt means, and that's how we manufacture the pigment, it's heated, it's burnt. It's adding basically a black to it. So it'll take any yellow slightly greenish. We saw that in the yellow video. So if I add a little bit of this burnt umber to this, it'll start taking this just a little bit greenish. And if it is not enough and it doesn't look quite to be enough, I can reach over and grab a touch of my black, which will take it even more. And if that starts to become too dark before it turns it, I can add a little bit of this. So this is how you're going to narrow down your colors. So you can see what's happening here. You can see was originally very warm. Now it's becoming this greenish look to it here. And that's kind of what I'm looking for right underneath there. That's kind of gonna be the tone there, all right? But I don't want it maybe not quite that dark, so I'll add just a bit of white to it. So we're gonna go Hansa, a little bit of yellow, and we'll add the burnt umber and a tiny bit of the black to it. And we'll get this. Let's use this little, sometimes I always say use a corner of a piece of paper, push that up there, and then see how close you got to that color. So that's what we got right there, and you can see that's kind of the tone there. I'm going to add a little extender just for wetness. It's not for keeping anything perfect or blendable. I'm just moving. I'm using it here really for some transparency. And I'm using short, kind of choppy motion here that's going to set the feeling of his body here. Okay, let's add a touch of this. It's going to go right up here right up underneath his chin here, and right down like that. We can put a mark or two of this. He's going to have this yellow band right here above his and in front of his eye. I could use this to chisel of the brush and push some of that in. But that's a good color. This is drying down and marking up. I call it marking up. It's looking like the color in his body. I might add a little bit more here, a little heavier, but see, short, choppy. I always say I don't want texture because I can't paint up. It's more difficult to paint on top of texture. You can lighten the pressure and smooth it out a little bit so you don't get all those marks, but I want to have it modeled, which means I get some interest. So sometimes I might just take a little, maybe even a little Indian yellow, a little different yellow, and add it through just as a nice little different note to it, okay? Now, we have that brush is just a touch big for some of the stuff I want to do there. So I'm going to paint him with a lot of detail. We're going to slow down, paint him with a lot of detail. And so I'm going to go down to my little number 4 filbert here. And we'll use this for more detailing. So now I have this color. Let's reach up and let's grab some of the yellow. We'll just put some white into some of this yellow, okay? And we're going to head to this color right here. So I look at this and it looks a little yellow, maybe a touch of the burnt umber, and really kind of a touch of the blue or the gray or any of these blues anywhere in here will get us over towards some of these grays, okay? And let's see where that color is. I always tell people when you're emulating a photo, this is a really good thing to do, to see I'm just a touch yellow, but I'm very close. I am really close, and that would be an acceptable tone really to start him in here, because I'm going to change this. So you have a couple of areas here. If you're a beginner, you have a mark right here. You can leave a little line so that you know. I'm just going to tap some of that through. And so this is going to be up into his body here, right up into here, right back behind his eye. There'll be a darker band right up above there, and then another little light band before it goes to a final little dark band. So we'll put some of that in there. We'll push some of that right up in here. Some of this right here on his body. This is the undertone. So this is going to be shadowed and highlighted. The undertone is more of a medium tone that we're looking for. It's like basing him in, right? We'll put some of this into his tail feathers here. They have the one thing, I love watching them fly, but they're really short tail feathers. And, I've painted them a couple times. It's been several years since I've painted him, though. Real fun bird. Let's add a little blue and a little burnt umber to this. Okay, maybe a little more burnt umber to that. And maybe even some of this gray or some white, just to lighten it a little bit. Now you'll see it's a little bit more blue. It's a little bit more blue and slightly darker. And this is a good color to start underneath his beak here. So I'll start that right up on the top of his beak here. We'll start some of that color. And I'm a big advocate, even though you don't pick it up too much, maybe just model it with a little bit of this. Let's just streak some of this through other light areas of his body, especially like right down in here, because it just carries the color, carries the tone through him. And you'll see little edges of little colors of tone here that you want to kind of, as you're basing them in, you want to just kind of splash some of these colors around, right? That's where they'll get the most interest. Let's lighten that up right in here. Let's just add some more light to that, right? We'll just lighten up here. Let's just take this right down in here, tap. And what I try to do is find kind of the direction that I'm going to paint on a feather. So I'll pull down here And there's going to be this light little band right there. No texture. Try not to, because we're still just base coating in. So I had a little texture there, and I'll just touch it off with my finger. And yeah, we'll push a little light right in here. There's going to be the light eye ring that's going to go around his eye. We're going to tap in some lights and some small movements of color in there. Let's use the chisel right here, right up in here, and get that light. That light is right up, a touch of that right up there. Okay, let's add a few marks. You know, all this will change. We'll add a few marks around, a little bit back here onto the back. Okay, so that's pretty good there. Now, what I usually do is, so I block in with a medium, what I call an undertone. So I'm looking for that. Then the next step, what I do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to look for the actual shadow tone. And the shadow tone can be 2 or 3 different tones. But one of the things I'm going to do here first is I am going to put in his eye so I can see how much contrast I want. I'm going to take my number 4 round, which I always call my bird painting brush. It's the one that does a lot of detail with it. It's a fusion, very fine point round that can do tremendous detail. I'm going to take a little burnt umber and a little bit of black, and I'm just going to, I don't want to put any texture in this, but I'm just going to do small little marks, just tapping it around, building the shape of his eye here. I'll leave a little bit of the light color right there so that it almost looks like a little highlight for right now. And that'll work. Let's just take some of this dark while we're here, and we'll put it where we know where it's going to go. Right down along the line of his beak here. You'll see just some of it. Tap it off so it's not like making a line. You don't want to make a line. Right, so we'll tap some of that off. Let's add a little more brown to this. And sometimes you'll see me, I'll take my finger here and put out just a little dot of the extender. You could use extender or water. I'm just using this for some transparency here. Just transparency. And so I'm going to pull, that's a little low right there. I'm going to pull some of this line up here and get to the roundness of his head and around like that. And so I took that a little low where it's going to eclipse his eye. That's not correct. So you can take just a damp brush with a little bit of water in it, just a little bit, and just lift it right off. Sometimes I'll do this and drag the edge like this, and that will actually cause like a little shadowing there of him. Works pretty nice. I try not to do at this, specifically at this stage, not to do anything perfect. I want to leave room to refine him later on, but we can make a little more dark right here, just like that. Okay. And so I'm going to continue on. Now, sometimes, you know, when you have these little bands of color, you can use your small round, but sometimes using just a chisel of a smaller brush, like I like this little filbert here, to put some of these areas in, works because you can pull and you can, you know, use the chisel here, but you can widen it out and get that painterly look as well, just by pulling this way across it. That works. Let's just tap in a bit. Let's just go around his eye ring just a bit. So, you know, adding this much to him at this time, that's kind of an artist's choice. I'm adding a lot to him, but it's kind of fun. I like to see him come to life a bit. Let's go over here, add a little, and it takes, ever so much blue, because the Phthalo Blue is such a powerful, powerful color. Let's just add a little white, a little blue, a little burnt umber. The burnt umber is going to gray the blue. That's what we're looking for. And then a little light to lighten it. And we want it mottled. In other words, when you look, I'm looking at the tip of his beak. Sometimes it's kind of brownish, sometimes kind of bluish. Let's use the chisel of our brush right here. Real careful and get the the tip of that, and let's just draw that down carefully down that side. The chisel on this little number 4 is very powerful. I mean, it's very sharp, so it does nice work here. Let's just kind of slide and tap this a bit right in there. And sometimes I'll pull it off like that so it doesn't make it, too much of a line. I like the blurriness of it. There, that works pretty good. And tap some of that around in a few other areas here. So you put a little more color. We're going to work the highlights and all that kind of stuff in here in just a bit. But let's tap. So I work around. So that's really blue. Let's add a little brown to this. Change it up a bit. And let's just add a little mark or two up around the eye there. And see, I tap it off so that I just tap it off. Now, you could use a small brush, too, to tap it off, just to get that blurry interest in there. And I like that. Let's tap this through that. Okay. Now, let's continue on down over here. Little blue burnt umber. So it makes almost a blackish color here. Let's just come down and put some of this in, right in here. Small marks like this, small marks, right down there like that. Small marks. We're going to go back and forth with some yellow and stuff and blacks as well. But this just puts in basically where we're going to paint here. Okay, this marks up where we're going to paint on him. Right down like that. Continue that down just a bit, but touch and lift off. So you get a little feathery look right there. And that's just to start him out. And you could start a few of these other little marks. I'm going to go back and forth. I'm going to show you a back and forth with a light and a dark painting here. I'm putting in how to do some of this stuff. And let your color vary. Let it run off. Sometimes it's a little heavier. Sometimes it's a little softer. Look to where you see some of the darks on him, blues, burnt umbers, sketchy. I just love the softness of the brush. If I lift the pressure, it gets very draggy, very sketchy. And I like that as well. Just putting in a little bit of the color here. You can go more perfect, but see, there's a lot of little marks all down here, and I'll just use the chisel like this just to emulate those. I'm not going to paint them perfectly. There's no need here. A bit more color, a bit of this. So you can see, on the Meadowlark, on a lot of these birds, I use the darks to kind of sketch and draw, draw him. And then I'll paint out, I'll remove some of it with some of the lights. We'll show you that. Let's put a few. So if you're going to put on the darks, actually put on a little more than what you think, because we can soften it out and paint it out later on. Little line here for the edge. His wing basically folds on these guys. They fold back into their body. Their mantle and stuff comes back up over their body, and it kind of really disappears in there. It really does. Let's take some burnt umber, a little bit of the yellow here, right? Mix maybe a touch of the blue. Very light gray. I'm going to add some extender to this. Add some white. Let's see where we are. A little more brown, a little more yellow. Too much blue. That's pretty good. That color looks pretty nice. Little extender in this. Again, I'm using it not to keep it wet, but to thin it out. I love the feel of extender into my brush when I'm stroking it, because it just slides around. It's slippery. So I like that. So I'm going to add a bit of that right there. Okay. And let's tap a bit of that around some of his eye. Maybe some of that right here where the yellow is going to go, right up here on the very top. That forms the top part of his head. We'll see that. We'll put that white back up on there. So you see I'm painting a lot of undertones. This is a beautiful tone. I'm going to push some of it right down in here onto his body, just short, choppy little strokes like that. Okay, and I'll tap it in, right? It's a beautiful tone. Burnt umber, a little blue, a little yellow, slightly greenish, but it's a beautiful tone. Right up here, I'll just tap that around, right? Now, if you're having a hard time, you can put some extender over the surface. I've done that before, and it works really well. And then, the thing is, though, you can blend it out really too much, get it too smooth. I don't like it to be too smooth. I like it to be choppy like this because that emulates his feathers, right? That's what I'm looking for. Let's go. It's going to go warmer up here. So let's head back to that little bit warmer that we had here before. Maybe even just a little bit more yellow. And let's put in some choppy marks here of that color right in there. And override some of this, which will sink that color into his body. Okay, now let's practice, because this is a good area. Well, let's take some of this first. It's got to go right up underneath his chin. It's a little darker right up there. Maybe even a little bit more of this brown here. Right? So we'll get that color in. Some of that right into here. I love just to put touches of colors in around those eyes. As we start to detail, that will just really cause him to spark. I'm going to rinse this out of my brush for a second. Okay. Now we're going to pick out a lighter color. So there's basically two lights. There's this real bright light right here, and then there's this low light. So let's go there first. Let's just take some of our Hansa yellow light. And it is a bit warmer than what the Hansa yellow light is, so I'm going to add a little Indian yellow to it. And then I'll help opaque it up a bit with some white here. So Hansa yellow light, Indian yellow, and a little bit of white. And again, you can, use an edge of a paper like this if you really want to emulate it really good and see how close you are. So I'm not looking at that very bright white. I'm looking at that one. Does that make sense? So I want to make that yellow that's pretty much right there, see? That yellow that's right there. So it's Hansa yellow, Indian yellow, and some white. And that's pretty good. So let's just pull this right down here. That's pretty good. And we'll pull this way. Down, we'll pull this. Don't eliminate all your other color, but then start doing this. Just add some marks and just lift up and let it fade away. So you're building his body. Does that make sense? We're building the feathers on his body. Here we'll put some heavier, and then I'll lift off. Here, lift, and let the other colors take over. And we'll do this. Let's put a little bit of this down this way. Anywhere I see some of the light tracking, a little bit of the light tracking there, okay? And it's going to take a couple times. Those colors are kind of weak, so it might take a couple times here. But let's come in now a little bit more yellow, maybe a touch of the Indian yellow and a touch of white, a little lighter yellow, and let's add a mark or two of that, strike of that, to build that up. Now, see, I'll pick up, now I can start adding some texture. And you have to, because these colors are kind of weak. So you have to start putting them on a little heavier to get them to show up. And maybe that shows up too much there. Maybe I came down too far. I don't worry about that because I can sit here and just take a softer one and paint back into it and push that into the body. Does that make sense? And it's this painting back and forth is where you get all of this lovely interest. And I'm not blending. It doesn't need to stay wet. I'm not using a blending technique. I'm using an acrylic layering technique. I'm just layering the colors on here and using the correct tonal value, what we call tonal value. So I'll pick up some more light here. Let's use this to pull down here on some of this light right in here. We'll establish some of that light tone that's right there. Maybe I'll use my finer brush for some of the detail. I'm just adding some of this to just strike in some main color because I love painting with this little filbert because it's not as detailed as the pointed round. So I can do wide strokes like this, and I can do more narrow strokes, and I can add some body strokes there like that. And I can start building his body where I see more of the yellow. So I'm going to want to build this chest area up a bit, maybe even a little more than what he has. But I might make a mark or two out like this to let it fade away, maybe just push them together. So I see that fading away in his body. That's what I'm looking for. Let's add maybe a touch of that right up underneath like we see on his chin there. Maybe that pulls down just a bit, leaving that little mark right there. You know, it's ever so soft right there. I've accentuated it a little bit more, but that's okay. And I'll use just the tip of this to add in some of the smaller, little softer. Matter of fact, we could even go a bit of yellow oxide into that so it softens out a bit. We're going to add more blacks and stuff to that as well. We'll paint back and forth in between. But a touch of the yellows in there for right now. That's all we need. Here, just to mark it a bit. Okay? All right. That looks pretty good. Now, let's come back in. And I'm going to set that brush down for a minute. And let's go right into our whites and a little bit of the grays. First, let's go up almost whites, and we'll just tap I like to do small little marks around for like the eye ring. Okay, sometimes I will take just the very tip of this, and instead of pulling around, I pull down slightly, which gives a little shine to the eye ring. Okay, and we'll tap up a bit here, just a bit. We'll look how far this actually goes into him there. Maybe he doesn't have a real catch light, but I might just accentuate that catch light a bit. Sometimes if I get it too big, I'll take a little burnt umber and push into that. A little burnt umber into the eye will give him more character anyway, right? And his eye is just a touch small. So I could take some black here with a little burnt umber and stretch that out just a bit and increase his eye just a bit. So I'm going to leave that catch light in there. If you don't like it, take it out. Okay, that's yours. Let's take a little blue, little burnt umber. He's got a lot, even though you think, oh, he's not a complicated bird. He does have a lot to him. So a little blue burnt umber and some white to make a slightly lighter value. Let's pull that down on the top part of that beak there. Maybe a bit more shadow right in there to add some different coloring in there. Slightly lighter again, right in here to paint the flat of that beak right there. Now that's a little too light, so I'll just take a little burnt umber and some of that color and stroke right through that, right here like that, real slow. Pull slow so that your colors don't mix too much. Okay, that's very important. Pull slow, and so your colors don't mix too much. Let's point that brush up a bit more here and just very carefully see how I'm just slowly going down to find the tip of that brush there, and I'll put that line in, and then we'll maybe widen it right down here so we catch that little bit more light right there. And I want that, you can see right here, that's his eye. I disrupted the edge of this eye right here, so I want to get that clean line back there. Again, I felt my hand do it, but I don't stop because I know I can fix it, but I was right in the middle of doing that. So, and let's just tap in a little more light. You can see leaving some of those crisp marks really give interest and stuff to him. Real character. So, it's like here I could soften that out a bit, or I can leave that a little sharper. It's kind of fun. Let's go with a little Indian yellow, a little bit of red in some of our whites here. We'll make this slightly orangish color, just a little more orangish color. Let's put that on right there because I kind of see that. And then right into our Hansa Yellow Light, maybe a little bit of white. Let's pull some lines up here, which give that lighter look to the top of his head there. So we'll look at that, and that could go maybe even a little yellow oxide. It's a little wide right there, so we'll push that back with that softer yellow, but I'll leave some of that brighter yellow up in there. I'm a little bit of a line right here. That's one reason why so I just stroke it a couple times through just to get rid of that line. That's what I'm looking for. And a soft yellowy white. It's more, his lights go more towards a burnt umber tan to a gray than anything else. So burnt umber is a real good color to have here on the palette. So let's just start right here with that light and pull that back, and maybe a bit more light on the edge. So it's basically just kind of identifying the colors and making the marks as you start to paint him, right? That's what we're doing. Let's take some of that light. And you can have out, a lot of times when I start painting some of this, if I start to work in small detail areas, those of you that follow me on birds, I start adding this. This is open medium. Open medium, it's a great thing to add because it's going to keep the paint wet, but it's going to allow you to add some transparency to your colors while still having thickness to your colors. And that's one reason why I use them. So I want to come in here and I want to tap into this area with some lights, but we put that dark in there. So I want to restate all of this, some of this dark. So if I add the open medium down here, this will stay wet in here for a while. And I can go back and forth till I start to see, and it smooths it out a bit there, and I start to emulate some of the area there that I want. I'm going to put, and he doesn't have it, but I'm going to put it a little bit of yellow right in here. This is where I start to detour from the birds a bit and start doing my thing. I like to do my thing. I'm going to add some lights, just short strokes here like that. And then I'll go back, pick up some open medium, grab some of my darks, and I'll short stroke through those, following kind of the contours here that I see there. And he has some more light. And so I start looking at him for lights and darks and where they are, that little bit of light that comes down through here. That's a little too light, but I'll go ahead and leave it for right now because I can just pick up some dark. Sometimes I'll just pull through it. Sometimes I'll just hit it with the brush there and start adding smaller little marks, a little blue and black, or excuse me, blue and burnt umber here. We're going to have some smaller little detail marks, and so you can get really detailed in here if you want. Detail him up, tap some of those in if you want. That's up to you. How much you do, that's up to you. It also depends on how steady your hand is. I'm getting older. My hand isn't quite as steady, but I still can do some nice stuff with it. But here we just don't speak. There we go. A little more color. See, working those colors really just adds a lot of interest to it. So I might take some of that brown and work back through this, soften that, and then come back with the light, touch back through. And I'm not blending them. I'm leaving the tonal quality of the color, And as things dry, I may come back again. So, here I'll take some yellows and some whites here, and I may come back. It's a little too much paint. Take some of it off and push that right back in there again to really get that nice light band above his head, his eye. And eventually it might just go Hansa yellow there, Hansa Yellow Light, right? So let's go down. Let's take a little yellow and a little Hansa. Even though we put it on with our number 4, we can come back here and start feathering up now. So I'll start using this. I love to pull this way. And so I touch and then push down. It's a touch and push down. I call that the feathering stroke. And then I'll come over here to this softer color and work a little of the softer color. And then eventually, the softer color here had more of our other 2 yellows. And then I'll add some burnt umber and stuff like that to it to get some of these other colors. And see, you get a beautiful transition. And I'm looking at working these colors back and forth. So I'll come back up here, add a bit more of this yellow. See, and I'll work back and forth until I get that really nice transitional tones. We call these transitional halftones, is what we do in portrait painting, but that's what I'm looking for, those transitional tones. And I'm going to build these up. Let's take the Hansa, a little bit of the Indian yellow, which is a warmer yellow-orange, and a bit of the white. Model it up here so it's not all perfect. And we'll start adding some of these shorter strokes like this that build him up even more closer to where we want him. And I love this because this is what I call the feather strokes. I touch and I lift off and it leaves that's why I love this little number 4, because it lifts off and leaves like a little edge of the feathers. So yeah, it's really, really nice. And so I'll add a few of these marks down through here. Let them just kind of touch down through there, right? And let's build a bit more yellow here. Go a bit lighter. The Hansa Yellow Light is kind of a weak yellow, so it takes a few applications. But in painting a bird like this, it's really nice because, you know, these few applications, the more you work it, the better the bird looks. So it's something that, you know, it's really kind of nice to have, that it is a little bit weak. So now you can take the burnt umber and a little bit of black, which will make the darker marks here. Take just a bit of it in your brush and paint back through some of these other marks here. And this is where I like to kind of push it with my fingers sometimes, highs and lows. Some open medium in it is fantastic because see, here's what you do. You're doing this, and see how this right here like this, it starts to make it mottled and look like what's going on in there, right? So you need a bit of that open medium. And sometimes you may lift up like this, which makes that more feathery edge with the yellows. And that's what gets you that undulating feathery edge that you can have here on those yellow areas. It's detail. And this is a lot of detail. You don't always see me paint with this detail, but some lessons I really do detail up my birds a lot. And this is one I'm going to keep into the studio here. And I really wanted to paint him up because this is the bird of where we live. And so I want to do kind of a real beautiful little painting of him. So I'll put a little bit more time into it. Some birds I really like the quick expression of a bird, so I don't have too much detail in it. I don't like them. I like the birds to be a painting and not to be a realistic, you know. I used to be super realistic. I'm not there anymore. I like impressionism. So I know how to do super realism, but I don't always like it. I like the birds to have their character. So I'm going to take a little yellows and stuff here. I'll work into the edge of this a bit. And so I'll work a few more little yellows tapping around in here. Maybe up in here, some of this around in there. Yeah, he needs let's go a bit more brown. And some open medium. That open medium's awesome because that's what gives you this, you know, this tapping here. Let's work this out a bit right here. So it needs to get a little bit whiter. Some more burnt umber, a little bit of black here, a little deeper. Take out some of the yellows. Give that feathery little edge. Sometimes, I mean, if you want to really create it, lift off like this and you get that little point, that little feathery edge there. That's up to you if you want to go that detailed on there. Okay, I like that. And yeah, let's pull some of this down this way. Set up some of this. I'm going to take a bit of burnt umber here and pull down this way a bit just to break that super sharp line here. Burnt umber and the Indian yellow is really nice for another little tone you can add into some of these deep areas right in here to make some of those shadowy marks and stuff, you know. And so I put too much on there, did it on purpose, so then I'll come back, I'm going to build the roundness of his head right here with this mark. And so you see some of that just rounding like this slightly, that's, you know, so it gives kind of the roundest look to his head. And you can, you know, you can come in here, there's little feather marks right here, you can add those all in. You can really get him quite detailed, okay? As much as you want, and he's really a lot of fun. As we go to the back side here of him, let's soften this out a bit, and we'll just, I'm going to go very simplistic back here, right? Just some lights and just paint in between. Just some ideas, very simplistic. I want him to soften out, if that makes sense. I want him to soften out. And I'm going to go back to, so a lot of that detail work, and I could probably add, looking at that, let's take a little light and add just a touch more light, small light, right up here along that beak line. And we'll increase the light right in here, just a bit. Small marks, you know, so some of you that, you know, are, you know, in the channel and stuff, you know, look at some of the different ways I paint the raptors, the hawks, and all of the details. And, you know, they have a really important one called the shadow from the upper lid, on the upper part of the eye, from the lid line. And so, you know, there's certain shadows, certain things you look for that give just great interest. But we'll just add a little light right there. His brown band on him is a little wider, so I'll just fix that up here. Here. There we go. Just something like that. That's better to him, and he's a little touch lighter up into the very front here. And see, that's all you do is you can just come in here and set some of this light. And this painting back and forth just adds so much to him. Let's take it a little bit lighter. And a few marks of light here, just a couple marks, just to lighten that up, just a touch more here. And that's really kind of, I call this a portraiture of them, you know, so we're really kind of getting a nice portrait of him here. A little bit of our lights into some of these grays stuff here. We can tap in a touch more light. And we got to remember something about your lights. They dry a value darker. Remember me saying this all the time, right? So you have to remember that. And so it may look a touch too light right now, but it'll dry down. And I'll feather that up a bit right there. And that gives a pretty good look to him there. You know, we can take a bit of this brown, kind of tan color. I thin it, little extender, because I don't like it too opaque back here, but we can drop in more of a rounding shadow here, up onto this side here, right like that. Blur him out a bit. It's not too big, too bad. I start looking at the structure of everything too when I start getting this detailed. And I got this line mic here so it distorts his eye a bit. So I want to add just the back side of that eye ring right there. So it rounds up his eye. Mine's a little bit more round than his. His goes oval slightly, but you can fix that. I like him, so I'm not going to touch it. But and I'll look for final shines and stuff that I want to add into a few areas. So maybe I might want to put a touch more on here. I'm going to put that on and then run through a brush with a little bit of water just to soften that out to see if I want to leave that. It'll dry down, right? So that's the hardest part. It'll dry down and you got to make that judgment right there. So that's pretty good on him. I like all of that. I might want just a little bit more yellow and white, bit of open medium here. But into this area right in here, a few final, maybe even a little lighter than what I see on him, just because I can. I like that contrast. But the Hansa yellow light's a little cool, so I add a bit of that yellow, Indian yellow in there to help warm it. But they're both weak pigments, so it takes quite a few applications of them to get them to go like that. So I'm going to keep that rest of him there very soft. I kind of like that. Maybe some thin, so I'll take some burnt umber, the point of the brush here, and just some thin applications here to suggest these side feathers on here on that. And there's a few up here. You could do more detail work. You see how to do the detail work. I don't, there are some of the birds, some of them in the bird books and stuff that I have. I have dozens of bird books and painting techniques, feathering techniques, all different kinds of ways to do things. And you can go look at those and see which ones you want to incorporate. I tend, so I painted a lot of detail in here, but I want to turn it into a painting now too by leaving that detail. I don't want to get super detailed in some of the other areas because then it becomes a realistic painting, and I don't like that. That's just me. You can get more realistic if you want. I'm going to take burnt umber, a tiny bit of the red, and some white here, and might have just a bit of the blue violet in there too. Just a tiny bit of that blue. But I'm going to be looking for this color that is on there. So it's the right color, just needs to be lighter. So let's add that in, maybe just a hint of blue here. Maybe too much, and I'm just going to use some water here, thin this up, and with those of you that have painted a lot of birds with me, I don't like to do a whole bunch of detail on their feet because I feel that even though their feet are huge, I call them their raptors, they're pterodactyl type feet on these birds. Little wrens have them and stuff, this huge, and they have this huge feet. And I find it detracts a lot from the actual fun beauty of the bird. So I tend to understate them a lot, and I'm going to understate them on him. I'm going to take a bit of the burnt umber and just suggest the claw tips here. And then I'll do a little shadow and stuff, a little bit of that painting thing on him. But I'm not going to do all that much. I don't want to. And so a little bit of burnt umber here onto this. Let's push some of this into the back, right across, and just lift this off. Just simple. I'm going to keep it kind of simple here. Bit to the bottom side, the shadow side here. And I mean, you can shadow, highlight, and do all of that stuff and make them all detailed if you want. I'm not going to. I'm especially not yet as well because I'm going to add the bark and stuff in here. So we've got that to do as well. There you go, just like that, right? So let's get into this. Let's take a bigger brush, and we want these gray blues. I'll just start mixing some. When I make, I get into, here's even a little bit of our base. When I start to mix some of the, outlying areas, I tend to just grab colors that I've already used around. So blues, reds, burnt umbers here, right? And we'll start to drop in this idea for this tip of this post, this old weathered tip of this post here. And I'll just tap around here, and I'm going to paint it very suggestively here. So no, not a tremendous amount of detail. I want your eye up and around him. That's where I'm going to be doing some more. I'm still going to do some more work up there, but that's really where I'm going to go. So I'll tap this into here. And some people say, well, why do you paint the feet first and then that? It's because that's the way I like to do it. And I blend the edges. See, I take the edges and I touch them into each other, so it's starting to soften out his feet. See, I'll blend them and touch them in together here. And that's the way I like to do them, right? Let's shadow and highlight. Let's just put in some shadow here. Burnt umber, a little bit of the blue. You can have a touch of black if you want here. I'm going to add a bit of extender. Let's work for some shadow lines here. And again, I'm going to be very simplistic here. And I'm just going to lay in some shadow where I see it here. Here like this. And maybe a few marks here. And how much you do, that's up to you. But I'm going to be... And I'll, let this kind of dry. I'm going to let this kind of dry up as I work a few other things. And then I'm going to work some of the highlights. So, but we have that beautiful mark of shadow, that ridge line of shadow here. So that little, from the broken split in it, a few little split lines there, And I'm going to let this dry up a bit, and then I'll come back and work some of the lights. So I'll work that back. Now, while that is going like that and drying up, let's come over with a bit bigger brush, and we're going to look at some of our goldenrod here, right? And some of our goldenrod colors. Now, you can get these beautiful olive greens a different way. I've showed you in the beginning. You can take, black and the Hansa yellow, some of the yellow oxide, and you get these beautiful, beautiful yellow greens, which are going to be those greens in there, see? And to brighten it up, you add the Hansa yellow light, which makes that brighter yellow green. And to dull it down, you add the... bit of the burnt umber and stuff like that, and the yellow oxide. That works as well. But I'm going to work just some very simplistic colors here. Just water. And I'm going to work this right into my edges and stuff like this as well. And I'm going to basically paint very suggestive here. And maybe a little water and a little... paper towel work action here, right? And very suggestive here. I want to give some vertical feel to this because that's what the goldenrod is, but I don't want to get it too stiff. So we're just going to work this through, right? And then we'll pull through a few little marks of it right like that, right? And maybe some shadow of it, some bit darker, maybe a few shadow marks of it down through here. Burnt umber, a little green here. some just marks of it, just ideas of it, the feel of it, right? And then what's going to make it the pretty part of it is the little flowers we'll paint. We'll do very impressionistic little flowers here. Okay, so there we go. We'll do, and I like this. I love the look of the paper towel. Yeah, just like that. Pull some of that through, some of that movement. Now, let's take like our you could use a filbert or a little flat or something like that. Let's start building some areas for flowers. And you can add some open medium to this to keep it thick and a little transparency. But first, so what we want to do is emulate some of the flowers coming like this, right? So we want to and you can look at the tips of these right out here, right? And we want to just emulate this. Sometimes I do this with a knife as well, when I don't want it to be, you know, super perfect and stuff. And so as we come down, of course, we'll be hitting leaves and stuff, which we'll put in there. But we'll leave more green. So we might have just a bit of one that comes right up there by him. You know, just the idea of one. And let's build this like maybe this one's coming out like that. A little lighter, little clumps of it, right? They have different kinds of goldenrod, stiff goldenrod and stuff, and all kind of different types of little flowers, but they're all basically the yellows and stuff here. So we'll push some of this in. And I don't want to look like we're painting around him, so I'm going to push some of that yellow right in back here as well. Seeing some of it through there, right? Because we don't want to look like we're painting around, because we haven't added the final lights to his tail or anything like that yet. There's final details, but so a little bit of that, right? And then we'll add areas of shadow. So and you can see it's real warm, almost like a burnt umber. It's beautiful little tone in there. And so we'll come in and add some shadow to it. So light's coming in basically this way. So we'll add, you'll see, look to, like here's a clump, you'll look to the low side, the shadow side of the clump here, and build a few shadows that way. Boom, boom, boom. Imagine just like clumps of it. So, little bit of open medium here. I just love that open medium, the feel of it. So we'll get some of that shadow in there. And some of that blur out. I just love painting with my hand too. And a little bit of shadow. That's good. Right in there like that. Now, I'm going to go back to my smaller little brush here. And I really do like, let me show you here, because there's a couple ways you can do it. One is you could use your knife. And let's come down here and just kind of yellows and all of our yellows here. All of them, just kind of model them together, right? But really get that yellow, Hansa yellow in there, Hansa yellow light, right? And so you can take this thick color that's like this, and you can just start doing this, and that emulates the little flower, the little blossoms. Does that make sense? Or you can come in another way in which I'll do it is I'll just start doing this and start emulating the little blossoms as well here. And if you've got a lot of difference, and I have a lot there, sometimes I'll blur these out like this so it creates a lower tone, and then I'll create a lighter tone on top or in front of that. So there's a number of different ways, and you've seen me, and it's almost like we're painting the hydrangeas before. Does that make sense? You know, I mean, the little clumps and stuff that we have here. So I'm going to start out with a little bit more yellow oxide and Indian yellow, and maybe make a few softer little light touches here. And the thing is, as I paint this, I'm rotating my brush to use different parts of it. And the color is coming off a little different here, using different parts here of the brush here to create. And then you can blur it as it starts to tack up. That's when I really like to blur it off a bit here. And you can start doing more precise, like right up front here, more precise little flowers kind of, if you want. I'm going to keep them mostly blurry so it doesn't conflict with him, right? But yeah, and little sprays, they'll be, they actually grow in little shoots, so you would have to develop some of those shoots, which I will. This is all background, so I'll develop this up here, some of this here, like that. And I might just take some of this right up here by him so it doesn't look like he's outlined, right like that. Put a few shadows in there, like that. And a bit heavier here. It's kind of nice. And we go back and forth. So after I start building some of this, and see, I like to just pick up some texture and drive that around too. I like that because then when I blur like that, the textures look really great. So there's all different kinds of ways. And if you feel like you're too stiff or stroked, put some on with your knife. Just grab your knife like this and start putting some on with the knife like this, because that's what's going to give you a different look to it. Does that make sense? And that's what we want. Some different looks here. Yeah, it's just got the beautiful thing, or what really great artists, is that they try not to repeat a mark too many times. And so if you're using a small brush and doing that, the odds are you're going to repeat some marks, and then that's going to make your painting less interesting. So you want everything to come back a little bit different. Everything's a little different, right? Boom. Here we go. Some of this back down in here. Let it fade away. Some of these little lights. Yeah, I love the knife and all of that casual nature there. Little bits of stuff. And then you can come in here, yellow oxide, some of the yellows, and get right back up into your little black and the yellow, right back up into your dirty, deeper, darker olive greens, and add some marks of those and some leaves here. This will help divide it up a bit, right? And you can add more of the look of stalks and stuff here. And this is where your larger leaves will come out through here as well. And I am going to like I said, I'm to the point here now away from my center of interest, which is him. So I will emulate a lot of this stuff. So in other words, just pull out, like it looks like leaves and stuff here, but I'm not going to make them specific, right? Just because big marks like that are going to really detract from the overall painting here. So I don't want to do that. I want to keep everything out here very soft and lost, right? And I can develop, like if I'm around here, this is one of the things I always say. If I'm around the bird, like right in there, I might take like even just some Hansa yellow light and paint out a few more specific pretty little flowers out there, because I can't, because it's in and around him, which is the center of interest. And so I will do that. But I don't want to get it all the way, you know, out to other areas too much, because that takes away from the center of interest, if that makes sense. Right? So it takes away. So we'll add a few of those right in there, right? And yeah, so, and if you feel that everything starts to get, and it does, after a while, if you worked on something like that for a long time, you start to feel, oh, now I'm getting it all too heavy, right? And in the last painting of the azaleas back there behind me, at the end of the painting, I took some, and we're going to take some blue and some of our violets kind of colors here, and the whites, and I'll add some extender to this, and I'll create some of the color, lighter color that I have, and this is where I start to pull through it, see? So I'll start to pull through, you get that movement on there, and then I start to do this, which adds sky to the colors, and adding sky to the colors gets rid of some of that other color, and it gets real heavy. So this is a technique that's wonderful, guys. If you ever feel that your painting starts to get too heavy, what you need to add back into it is sky, the sky color, see? And so I put this sky color back in here, and I'll even pull into here like this with some of this sky color to take away a bit of the heaviness of some of the other colors around there, see? And it makes it look lighter and airier. That's the sky. The sky is, you know, in a lot of landscapes and stuff, the sky is your answer to a lot of things. And in this type of bird painting here, the sky is the answer. And those of you that paint birds with me know I like to kind of clean up a little bit right around my center of interest, which is that guy. And I'll pull into the edge of this a bit here just to blur off those edges there, like that. Send some of these guys right back here to the back. Blur them out a bit. I like that. Softens them out. So maybe we do that right up here. We'll just pull through some of that. Blur it out. Up here we had that little bit more violet, which was quite nice. And we'll work that. But let's put some more blue, like right in here. Right? And pull through. Get that lighter sky. That light sky, that gray. Remember that initial gray? If you get too much blue, just come back with the initial gray we had as well. So, and we do this. We take it off and we blur it out. And if you blur out too much or you remove too much, you go back and put it back. But see how even this starts to soften out everything, and you're bringing out just a few of this, and you're adding actually visual interest to this. You're wiping out some of this stuff, basically, right? And it really does work. It's really a neat effect. So sometimes, you know, you work on stuff and it gets really, really heavy. And I always know, well, if that gets heavy, start taking it back out. And, you know, leaving a bit of it here and there just adds so much. But I love the softness of all of that. And so even after we've softened all of this off here, you know, I might come back. Let's just use the corner of this little flat, because that'll be different. And restate some of these little goldenrods right up here. Maybe a touch of white with that. Work those together right here. Little goldenrod flowers right up here. Boom, boom, boom. Right? You see some of those. So everything takes on this almost like misty look, you know. I love painting that. And there we go. A bit of that. bit more yellow. Different little guys here. There, like that. But so you can see it, and you can blur it out. If it's too much, just blur it out, you know, and that's gives you this great look. Get rid of that little shine there. You can see that just starts to look pretty good for him. And another little touch of these light golden flowers here. Like that. It's kind of pretty. Welcome to Nebraska. You see this, I saw this, I saw him, and you know, the flowers, of course, aren't completely out yet, but he was out in the prairie this morning on my walk. They were out everywhere. Now, we still have to come back. So you can see how that just puts in that softness. And so it's just like with the bird going back and forth, you know, and I have a little bit of his other body, this line right here that I had to bring back up, which is part of that division of his body, his thigh there. I should bring up a bit right there. And so I have a little bit more. I could add some more, you know, back up in through here into his body, you know, and redefine some of the marks and stuff. But I really wanted it to be about here. That's really what I wanted this whole painting to be about. And I could soften some of this out. Some of this back out again. Just like that. See, I put that gray stuff back up on top, see? And I let it fracture a bit, and it just looks wonderful. So we can even fracture this up a bit right here. And take some of that gray and find his tail again. Find the light and dark of his tail. Let it sit kind of soft, though. I really like that. But let's go back to some of this light gray, some browns, some other colors that we have here. And we've got to emulate some of the light here. And I like to do it when it's slightly dry, because I do this. I drag that color around to get some different looks here. And sometimes I'll use it very flat like this to create a granulation to it. And I'll go back and forth. Sometimes I just get sketchy like this and move it around. You know, when I'm painting logs like that. You know, so there's a bunch of different ways. Let's get some blues and some burnt umbers here. Some of these grays. Here, a little bit more burnt umber. Right in here. And just, so I'll go through with the lights, and then I'll go through with the darks again. And I'll set the darks again and the lights again. I'll look for areas like maybe I want that heavier ridge right there onto the light, right? I'll put some of that on. If you want to go over towards the more yellow onto this one and add the darks in there, the darks that you see in there, you can. In other words, some of these, you just go back in and restate some of the darks, dark structures, you know, get more precise. I use stuff like this, photos like this, for ideas. I don't copy them, you know. I just use ideas. And I'll tap in that line a bit more. But you work back and forth like this, see? So I can put in now a touch more dark, and each time I do this, I'm starting to refine the shapes a little bit more. And that's the way I like to do it. That's how I'm going to build this up. Let's put a bit more yellow into this gray. Lighten this up a bit. And the photo doesn't have it as much, but I like the yellow of the painting, so we'll add some of that into this stick, and then of course I'll restate his legs again. But I'm not going to paint them perfect. I'm not going to do that. Something about pterodactyl legs I just don't like. Yeah. But you can if you want. And, once you get up and you get some of this, don't forget, I mean, if you really want to paint, interesting stuff, and you can go back to the other videos where I paint a lot of logs and realistic logs, a lot of times I drag it with my knife like this. And then I'll start, because that gives this pockmark kind of look, and then I'll start smoothing it out, and I'll drag both lights and darks colors. So I may start right here at this edge here, point up, and start dragging. Here, let's get a little bit lighter. Maybe even a bit of this green in there, right? Even though the blue is in the other one, I'll use the green because I'm looking at the goldenrod. But I'll start dragging like that, and each time I do that, I start getting it closer and closer. But how much I want to do here, that's going to be my choice here pretty quick. What I want to, but it is looking pretty good. A little yellow, a little brown here. Let's put a bit of that brown in there. Maybe I'll thin it out with extender if I want to almost draw with it. Let's put a little blue in there too. Here, model this up, right? And, you've seen me like draw mountains and stuff like that. So, but I want that a little darker right there so it starts to diminish down. In other words, disappear down in there. Maybe a bit more brown right in there. So I'm looking at getting some interest, but not emulating it too much. I don't want to, like this might be too much. Too much out of the center of interest. I want it to be about him. And if I start adding too much interest down here, your eye's going to start coming down here. Does that make sense? So I want to be kind of careful how much I do add there. But a little bit here, a little bit of those lines, a little bit of those shadows. And maybe a edge. I do like the cracks in wood. Blue and burnt umber. Just, redo some of these cracks a bit here. And I do like that. And blur them just a touch here and there. Lost edges are so important, guys. Yeah. They're so important to paintings. So that's a lost edge. This is a found edge. So where I have that nice dark and real sharp line, that's a found edge. And that takes a lot of interest in. Here we go, in like that. So that looks kind of neat. We could model this up a bit with his, and then we could drag through and then put his feet back up on top. So we'll drag through a bit of shadow. I can still see his feet pretty good in there, so I got some shadow. Now, when I come back, we took the burnt umber, a little red, a little blue, a little violet here. Add some white, a little more blue here. Maybe I love the extender. I'm not using the extender to keep it wet. I'm using the extender to just make it slide. I like water too, but sometimes water is just a little too thin, right? So let's go back and touch through. Maybe a touch lighter, right? Build this up a bit here. And right down to his little claw. It's right there. But you can see all that, this light and shadow and how much detail and stuff like that you want to do. That's up to you. You want to give him his joint marks and shadows and highlights and all that kind of stuff. That's up to you. I'm not. Yeah, I'm going to keep this all as simplistic as possible. I will put a little highlight running on the light side here. And then I always save kind of, you know, when I do detail work, like I did up there on the bird, I always save some of the detail work or the actual drawing of it with the darks. I love to draw with the darks. I set I like the lights for shines and stuff. And I love to draw with the dark. So I'm not going to work super detailed, you know, put in his little, well, I guess you would call it like a wrist joint or something in here, these little joints. I'm not going to worry about all of that. I want to get a bit more on his tail, but I want to use the shadow here, burnt umber, into the shadow here and set this, little bits of this, lost and found, and then a little burnt umber claw that is going to give him his detail. Does that make sense? So I like to, and I can stroke it a couple of times to soften it out, maybe pull the claw out, but nowhere near detail. I don't want to do that here. So we'll just save that detail a little bit here. But you can add as much as you want. It's up to you. But that's gonna get a good look to him. A bit of the shadow. Yeah, big old claw feet. And if something, you know, looks kind of wrong to you, what I love to do, just like I do here, is I'll blur it slightly. Okay? Take it off, blur it. And because you've gotten a little bit, as a painter, you've gotten a little bit too outlined. Does that make sense? So you just blur it off and then come back and add a few little marks of light and shadow and stuff, and you don't need to get super detailed and stuff. So that's what I do. And so when I feel like that's starting to happen, and it is starting to happen to me, that's when I like to also take a bigger brush and just come back in and emulate through, get rid of that detail and put in the suggestions of the shape. So I'll start pulling through and basically eliminating some of that detail. This is what I like to do. So we're all a little different, but I don't like to big claw. There's people that love to paint the big claw feet. I don't like them, you know, so, but you can add highlights back with this and more casual highlights. Let me show you. So you can, you know, if you want to come in and highlight with this, the edge of a flat, this works really nice, just tapping it as well. Okay, so, you know, you can come back in and put in some highlights like that and work on his, you know, his definition here a bit. And if none of that works, cover it all up with Goldenrod. That's what I do, you know. And it's, yeah, it works. But I want to thin down this one a bit here. So I'll just add in some of that back gray. Sometimes I'll just do this. I'll blur that out. And that's where I like the lost and found of everything. But there you go. Just little edges and marks, and you can blur it out slightly. And, yep. And add some more detail to shadows underneath there if you want. If you want his to sit down into that shadow there, you know, that will help his feet and stuff set down onto that. That's up to you. Again, it's just how much detail. I don't care for it, so I don't do it. I love this stuff. That's where I am in my painting career and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, as far as the bird himself up here, finishing up some stuff, I would take a little more blue, maybe a little more violet, and I would make that light, even lighter yet violet. And we rinse some of that out. My brush gets too full of color. I'll take some of this, and You know, those of you that, like I said, those of you that paint birds with me, you know I like to come in like this and really define up and around, and I'll take some of that right out into him, right out into that. Really define, you see that clarity right around the bird here. So none of this, none of the background and stuff. I like it really clear right in there of what's happening. So we did the violet, we did it a little bit more blue. Now I'm doing it a little bit more violet. And it's just a nice look to it. And let's, so that's kind of nice and nice look. Let's take the lighter, a little lighter gray, maybe some extender, and pull that through right up in here as well, and lighten up some of that look. So, because you can get too heavy in color, so we'll push through, and going back to that neutral always just kind of lightens everything up. See, and it gives a nice look to that, to him, right? So, and this is what I like. I mean, and I like, you know, some of you have written, oh, I really like your little sparks of color. Well, you can come in and start adding sparks like this, and see how that breaks that all up. So I would, you know, and if I feel anything is heavy, guys, just do this. Break it up and start breaking your knife. Your palette knife is just wonderful for breaking up the heaviness of some of this stuff, or doing some of the casual drawing for you, right? Just break it up a bit and add some of those other, and, you know, use it for both the lights. Take some of your light colors, break up some of that, and, you know, and like you see here, they have more defined leaves. You could put some of those defined leaves in there. I put just the suggestion and then covered them up. I don't like them that much, so I'll take that out. But, you know, that's up to you, you know. Yeah, but that knife, doesn't that look neat? Doesn't that look neat as it just breaks it all up? And it adds the sparks. And, you know, especially as you come up here, just take take some white, maybe a bit of your, let's go right up here, some of your Hansa yellow light, some of that white, just nice little sparks here. Some nice little sparks right there. And maybe model that with a bit of the Indian yellow, so some of that gets a little warmer, little sparks. That just looks wonderful in the painting. See, and you can take some of that and, you know, add a little texture or draw down on him as well. I like that that extra little bit. It's just fun stuff. I just love the last little sparks of the design. And one of the comments on one of the azaleas on the azaleas lesson that I painted was, I love the sparks at the end. And I was like, yeah, me too. I love those too. I don't know. There's some people might think that they're not defined enough, but I like them. And it's all up to you, right? That's the beautiful thing about art, guys, is that we're all different. You know, my daughter is a completely different painter than I am. So there you go. That'll get you a pretty good idea of him. I am going to take some light gray, a bit of this yellow, some of this, and just kind of emulate his tail again, just so we can kind of see it there. But I want it to mostly fade away here. A little bit of dark to the bottom side here. Maybe a bit of the burnt umber. And I'm just going to call that done. I'm not going to do too much here. Yeah, I'm going to maybe paint some goldenrod over his feet. No, I won't. I'm just going to let them sit. They're fine. Just let them sit. Just, a little too much. Yeah, sometimes you just got to watch away, and you got to realize that right up in here is where people see, right? Down in here is where everything is softening and fading away. So they're looking right up in here, so we can add a bit more of that right up in here. Bit more streaks of color to get that loggy look there. And then I'm going to call this, but so how much you actually do, that's up to you. But you got a good technique for doing that. That's a fun technique for painting the birds. That's just one of the many techniques. I've written dozens of books on painting birds and lots of lots of different classes. I have online classes on it, and painting the songbirds and stuff, all kinds of things, painting the raptors and stuff. But you get a pretty good emulation of him there. You get a pretty good, so by leaving just a little bit more sparks and brushwork here, I'm leaving just a touch more interest to him. Let's take one last thing. Let's take just a touch of that color of his feet and add just a movement of that in there. That's real close to what he has here. That's good. Yeah. That's fun. He's fun. So hope you enjoyed that. Okay, it's a little bit longer lesson, but I wanted to kind of paint that through. I love this. Boy, isn't that, you take away the heaviness of some of that. I just love that. But hopefully you enjoyed that. Okay, we're going to continue on. More landscapes, flowers, animals, all that kind of stuff. But I thought I'd do this Meadowlark because they're out everywhere right now. And I had a request, can you do a Meadowlark for the spring series? So I had that. So thought I'd get this lesson out of the way as well. Okay. And it's a little complicated, especially for beginners, but you just take your time and you layer that. And don't forget, you can go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Change your brushes so that you change your marks, okay? And that's really important, all right? All right, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, please, guys. It helps us a lot. If you want to see these types of series, you got to help us out by pushing that like and pushing that subscribe, because that helps us. And because if we don't get enough likes, we don't do those videos anymore, okay? That's the way it works, and we appreciate your support. Thanks so much. Those of you that are membership and stuff, I'll put final photos and that traceable and stuff in the member section. Go over to community page, hit the member section, and you'll see it there. I put up photos of all of the last pieces and stuff that we've done so far. I put that up this morning, I think, and so you'll see that. And I'll see you guys in the next day or two, okay? All right, we'll do it again. Bye-bye. Okay. Okay. Whoa.